A freezing Tuesday night in November wasn't meant for saving anyone. Vincent drove past the rusted bus stop without a second glance until the headlights caught the shape huddled on the bench. A girl, shivering in a denim jacket 2 sizes too small. He told his driver to keep going. He broke bones for a living. He was no saint. But as the car passed, the neon street lamp illuminated the stark, angry purple bruises wrapping around her exposed wrists. "Stop the car," he said. The rain in this city didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Vincent sat in the back of the Lincoln, staring out the tinted glass. The heater blew dry, hot air against his shins, a stark contrast to the miserable sheet of water coming down outside. He was tired. A dispute at the docks had dragged on for 6 hours, ending only when Vincent made it clear that breathing was a privilege, not a right. His knuckles still ached faintly. "Take the bridge, Carmine," Vincent murmured, rubbing his temples. "I want to be home before midnight." Carmine grunted an affirmative, steering the heavy car down 4th Avenue. It was an industrial stretch, a graveyard of closed factories and pawn shops. Nobody walked here after dark, not if they wanted to keep their wallet or their life. That was why the shape at the bus stop caught Vincent's eye. It was just a lump at first, a pile of discarded clothes left on the metal mesh bench. But as the headlights washed over the shelter, the lump moved. A girl. She was curled into a tight ball, knees pulled up to her chest, her head tucked down. She wore a faded denim jacket that offered absolutely no protection against the biting 30-degree wind. A plastic grocery bag sat by her feet. Vincent looked away. He had a rule about strays. You feed a stray, it follows you home. You let a stray into your house, it ruins the furniture. He dealt in ledgers, extortion, and controlled violence. Pity was a liability he had cut out of his diet a decade ago. The Lincoln rolled past the shelter. Then she shifted. The girl reached up to pull the thin collar of her jacket tighter around her neck. Her sleeve rode up. Under the harsh, flickering glare of the street lamp, Vincent saw it. It wasn't just a bruise, it was a grip mark. Deep, mottled purple turning a sickly yellow at the edges, wrapping entirely around her narrow forearm. 5 distinct points of pressure. Someone had grabbed her, hard enough to nearly snap the bone, and held on while she fought. Vincent's jaw tightened. Violence was his trade. He understood it. He orchestrated it. But he despised sloppy, emotional violence. A man who beat a woman didn't do it for business. He did it because he was weak. "Stop the car," Vincent said. Carmine hit the brakes. The Lincoln slid slightly on the wet asphalt before coming to a smooth halt 20 yards past the shelter. "Boss?" Vincent didn't answer. He pushed the heavy door open and stepped out into the freezing downpour. The cold hit him like a physical blow, cutting straight through his tailored Italian wool suit. He ignored it, walking back toward the shelter. His leather shoes splashed in the oily puddles. The girl didn't look up until he was standing directly in front of her. When she finally raised her head, Vincent felt a strange, cold pull in his chest. She was young, maybe early 20s, but her eyes held the exhausted, hollow look of someone who had lived a lifetime in a very short span. Her blonde hair was plastered to her cheeks with rain and sweat. She was shivering violently, her teeth clicking together. She looked at him. She didn't scream. She didn't ask for help. She just pulled her knees tighter to her chest, a purely defensive instinct. "You're going to freeze to death out here," Vincent said. His voice was flat, neutral. "Bus is coming," she whispered. Her voice was barely a rasp. Vincent glanced at the rusted sign attached to the shelter. The 42 doesn't run past 10 p.m. It's almost midnight. She blinked. The information took a second to process through the fog of hypothermia. When it hit, a profound, quiet despair washed over her face. She closed her eyes and rested her forehead back on her knees. Okay. That single word grated on Vincent's nerves. It was the sound of someone giving up. He took off his overcoat. He stepped closer. She flinched, a full-body jerk away from him, throwing one hand up to cover her face. The sleeve dropped again. More bruises along her bicep, a faded one on her jawline. Vincent stopped moving. He kept his hands visible. "I am going to put this coat around your shoulders," he said, speaking slowly, clearly. "Then you are going to get in my car. I have a heater. I have food." She lowered her arm a fraction of an inch. "I don't have any money." "I didn't ask for money." "Then what do you want?" It was a fair question. Men in $5,000 suits didn't pick up soaked girls at bus stops out of the goodness of their hearts. "Right now, I want to get out of the rain," Vincent said. He stepped forward, draped the heavy, dry wool coat over her trembling shoulders, and picked up her plastic grocery bag. It weighed practically nothing. She stared at him, calculating the odds. The cold was killing her. The man might kill her. But the car was warm. She stood up. Her legs buckled instantly. Vincent caught her by the elbow, careful to avoid the grip marks, and steadied her. She was shockingly light. Beneath the wet denim there was nothing but bone and tension. He half led, half carried her to the Lincoln. Carmine had the rear door open. He didn't say a word, just kept his eyes on the street. Vincent helped her into the back seat, sliding in next to her. The heavy door clicked shut, cutting off the sound of the storm. The silence inside the car was absolute. The heat blasted over them. The girl huddled into the corner of the leather seat, pulling Vincent's oversized coat tightly around herself. The smell of rain and wet asphalt filled the expensive interior, masking the usual scent of expensive cologne and leather. "Drive," Vincent told Carmine. "Where to, boss?" Vincent looked at the girl. Her eyes were already drooping, the sudden warmth dragging her into unconsciousness. "Home," Vincent said. Harper woke up fighting. She kicked out, her heel catching nothing but heavy, high-thread count cotton. She gasped, scrambling backward until her spine hit a solid headboard. Her hands grabbed the sheets, pulling them up to her chin. She was breathing fast, her chest heaving. She waited for the blow. She waited for the shouting, the smell of cheap whiskey, the heavy thud of boots on linoleum. Nothing came. The room was silent. Harper stopped thrashing and looked around. This wasn't her cramped, mouldy apartment. This wasn't the bus stop. The room was massive. The walls were painted a deep, matte charcoal. Floor-to-ceiling windows covered one entire wall, showcasing a sprawling, grey city skyline under a bruised morning sky. The bed she was sitting in was the size of a small boat, piled high with white down comforters. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in her stomach. Where was she? Memories returned in fragmented flashes. The freezing rain, the rusted bench, the numbness creeping up her legs. Then, a man. Tall. Dark eyes that gave nothing away. A heavy wool coat that smelled like cedar and something metallic. A car interior so quiet it felt like a vault. She looked down at herself. She was wearing a grey t-shirt that was massive on her, falling to her mid-thigh. It was impeccably soft. Underneath, she still had her own underwear. She let out a shaky breath. She hadn't been touched. She swung her legs over the edge of the bed. Her bare feet sank into a plush rug. She needed her clothes. She needed her shoes. She needed to leave before whoever owned this place realized they made a mistake bringing her here. Men with money didn't do favors. They bought things. And Harper wasn't going to be bought. She stood up. Her head spun for a second, a lingering effect of exhaustion and lack of food. She steadied herself on the nightstand. Next to a modern, dim, glowing lamp, there was a glass of water and 2 white pills on a small porcelain plate. A note sat beside it, written in sharp, architectural handwriting. Advil. For the fever. She ignored the pills. She walked slowly toward a heavy wooden door, expecting it to be locked. When she turned the handle, it clicked open silently. She peeked out. A wide hallway, lined with abstract art, stretched to her left and right. It smelled like fresh coffee and roasting garlic. Her stomach gave a violent, painful cramp. She hadn't eaten anything but half a stale bagel in 2 days. Harper crept down the hallway, following the smell. The floor was polished hardwood, cool against her feet. The apartment was dead quiet, save for the faint hum of a refrigerator. She reached the end of the hall and stepped into a living space that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Sleek, dark furniture. A massive marble kitchen island. And a man. He was standing at the stove, his back to her. He was wearing black dress pants and a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his forearms. He was stirring something in a pan. Harper froze. Her instincts screamed at her to back away, to find a fire escape, a window, anything. She took a slow step backward. Her heel found a creaky floorboard. A soft squeak echoed in the massive room. The man didn't jump. He didn't whip around. He just calmly turned off the burner, wiped his hands on a towel, and turned to face her. It was the man from the bus stop. In the daylight, he was even more intimidating. He had sharp, angular features, dark hair brushed back, and eyes the color of old iron. There was a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. Harper immediately crossed her arms over her chest, a defensive posture she didn't even realize she was taking. Her fingers dug into her own arms, right over the bruises. "You're awake," Vincent said. His voice was low, smooth. It didn't hold a trace of surprise. Harper didn't speak. She just stared at him, her eyes darting to the heavy wooden block of kitchen knives on the counter, then to the front door down the hall. Vincent tracked her gaze. He read the geometry of her panic perfectly. "The front door is unlocked," he said, leaning against the counter. He crossed his arms, mirroring her. But where she looked terrified, he looked utterly relaxed. "Your clothes are in the dryer. They smelled like damp rot. My housekeeper threw them in this morning. They'll be dry in 10 minutes. "Where am I?" Harper managed to ask. Her voice cracked. "Downtown," Vincent said. "My apartment." "Why? You were freezing to death. It seemed impolite to let you." "I don't know you." "You don't. My name is Vincent. I don't have any money," Harper blurted out. It was her default defense. She needed him to know she had nothing of value. "If you want something from me, I don't have it." Vincent stared at her. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes darkened. He pushed off the counter and took a step toward her. Harper flinched violently. She threw her hands up over her face and curled her shoulders inward, bracing for the strike. It was a reaction burned into her muscle memory. Silence stretched in the room. When no blow came, Harper slowly lowered her arms. Vincent was standing exactly where he had been. He hadn't taken another step. He was looking at her, and for the first time, Harper saw something other than cold indifference on his face. It was a flicker of deep, simmering anger. Not directed at her. Directed at whatever had taught her to flinch like that. "I am going to put a plate of eggs and toast on this island," Vincent said quietly. "Then I am going to walk into my office. I will close the door. When your clothes are dry, you can put them on. You can eat." And if you want to walk out that front door, you can. Nobody will stop you. He turned around, picked up a spatula, and slid 2 eggs onto a ceramic plate. He added 2 slices of toast. He pushed the plate across the marble island. Then, without looking at her again, he walked across the living room, entered a room down the hall, and shut the door behind him. The click of the latch echoed loudly. Harper stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen. She looked at the front door. She looked at the plate of food. Steam was rising from the eggs. Her stomach growled again, a vicious, painful sound. Moving cautiously, as if the floor might give way, she walked to the island. She pulled a stool out and sat down. She ate the eggs. She ate the toast. She didn't taste any of it. She just ate mechanically, her eyes fixed on the closed office door, waiting for the trick, waiting for the catch. But the door stayed closed. 40 minutes later, Harper was dressed. Her denim jacket and faded black jeans were warm from the dryer. They smelled like lavender fabric softener, a scent so foreign to her it made her dizzy. She tied her worn-out sneakers, sitting on the edge of the plush living room sofa. She grabbed her plastic grocery bag. It held everything she owned: a toothbrush, a half-empty stick of deodorant, a change of underwear, and a photograph of her late mother. She looked at the front door. It was right there. Freedom. But freedom meant the streets. It meant the cold. And worse, it meant Ray. A shudder ran through her that had nothing to do with the temperature. Ray. He would be looking for her. She had walked out while he was passed out, drunk on the sofa. She had taken her bag and ran, wandering the streets for hours until she ended up at that bus stop. If he found her, he wouldn't just leave bruises on her arms this time. He had promised to break her jaw if she ever tried to leave again. Harper swallowed hard. She walked toward the front door. She put her hand on the heavy brass handle. She couldn't do it. She didn't know where to go. She had $12 to her name. Her shift at the diner was supposed to start at 6 a.m. She glanced at a sleek digital clock on the wall. 1:15 p.m. She had missed it. The manager, a sweaty, impatient man named Gary, had told her one more no-show, and she was fired. She had nothing. Slowly, she released the door handle. She turned around and looked down the hall at the closed office door. Vincent had said she could leave. He hadn't said she had to. She walked down the hallway. Her sneakers squeaked slightly on the hardwood. She stopped outside the office door and raised her hand. Her knuckles hovered an inch from the wood. She hesitated. This was stupid. This man was dangerous. You didn't get an apartment like this, with a presence like that, by being a nice guy. She was trading one monster for another, but this monster had fed her, and he hadn't hit her. She knocked. 2 weak taps. "Come in," his voice called out. Harper pushed the door open. The office was a corner room, flooded with grey afternoon light. Vincent sat behind a massive mahogany desk, a phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking in rapid, hushed Italian. When he saw her, he paused. He held up a finger, signaling for a minute, and wrapped up the call. He set the phone down. "The clothes fit, I assume," he said. "They're mine," Harper said. "They smell better now." He leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. "Did you eat?" "Yes, thank you." Harper hovered in the doorway. She didn't know what to do with her hands, so she clutched the plastic bag tightly against her chest. "You're standing near the door, but you aren't leaving," Vincent observed. "Why?" Harper trailed off. She hated the weakness in her voice. She cleared her throat and tried to stand straighter. "I missed my shift at work." "Where do you work?" "A diner in Southside. I was supposed to be there at 6. I slept too long." Vincent pulled a sleek silver laptop toward him and opened it. "What's the name of the diner?" "Frankie's. Why?" He didn't answer. He typed for a few seconds. "Manager's name?" "Gary." Vincent picked up his phone, dialing a number. He put it on speaker. It rang twice. "Frankie's Diner, what do you want?" A gruff voice answered. "Gary?" Vincent asked. His voice was pleasant. Too pleasant. "Yeah, who's this?" "My name is Vincent. I'm calling on behalf of Harper." Harper's eyes widened. She shook her head frantically, waving her hands. "Harper? That little tramp didn't show up for her shift. Tell her she's fired. I don't care what her excuse is." Vincent's pleasant expression vanished, replaced by a cold, hard mask. "Gary, listen to me very carefully. Harper experienced a medical emergency last night. She is currently resting. She will retain her position, and you will pay her for the shift she missed today." Gary barked a laugh. "Who the hell do you think you are? I don't pay nobody for not working. She's fired. Tell her to come get her last check, or I'm tossing it in the trash." Vincent sighed. It was the sound of a man inconvenienced by idiocy. "Gary, my last name is Gallo." Silence fell over the line. Heavy, suffocating silence. Even Harper, who lived on the absolute bottom rung of the city's ladder, recognized the name. Gallo. They owned the shipping lanes, the construction unions, and half the politicians in the state. When Gary finally spoke, his voice was a mere squeak. Mr. Gallo?" "Yes." "Does Frankie's Diner still get its produce delivered by Apex Trucking?" "Yes, sir. It would be a shame if those trucks suddenly stopped running. Things go bad so quickly in the back of a warm truck, Gary. It ruins businesses." "Mr. Gallo, please. I didn't know." "You know now. Harper keeps her job. She will return when she is well. You will treat her with the utmost respect. Do we have an understanding?" Yes, sir. Absolutely." "Good." Vincent hung up. He looked across the desk at Harper. Her mouth was slightly open. She looked terrified. You're a Gallo," she whispered. "I am," Vincent said. He closed his laptop. "So your job is secure. You can leave whenever you like." Harper stared at him. "Why did you do that?" "Because men like Gary annoy me. They exploit people who can't fight back." "And men like you," she countered, suddenly finding a spark of anger. "What do you do?" Vincent didn't blink. "I exploit people who can fight back. It's a more even playing field." He stood up and walked around the desk. He leaned against the front of it, crossing his arms. "Now, let's talk about the bruises on your arms, and the one fading on your jaw." Harper took a step back, her defensive walls slamming up instantly. "I fell." "You didn't fall," Vincent said calmly. "Gravity doesn't leave finger marks. Who did it?" "It's none of your business. I'm leaving." She turned toward the hallway. "If you leave right now, where do you go?" Vincent's voice followed her, devoid of judgment, presenting only the bleak reality. "You missed your shift. You have nowhere to sleep. And whoever put those marks on you is likely looking for you." Harper stopped in the hallway. Her shoulders slumped. "His name is Ray," she whispered to the floor. Vincent walked to the doorway of the office. "Is Ray a husband? A boyfriend?" "Ex-boyfriend," Harper said, turning back to face him. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears of frustration. "I left him last night. That's why I was at the bus stop. He gets angry when he drinks. He doesn't like it when I try to leave." "I see." Vincent's face was unreadable, but a dangerous stillness settled over his posture. He looked at the frail girl standing in his hallway, clutching a plastic bag like it was a shield. "Are you going to go back to him?" "No," Harper said quickly. Never. I'd rather freeze. Good. Vincent reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek silver money clip. He peeled off $500 bills and held them out. Take this. Get a motel room. Get some food. Harper stared at the money. It was more cash than she had seen in 6 months. I told you I can't pay you back. It's not a loan. Then what is it? Pity? She spat the word out. Vincent lowered the money slightly. Consider it an investment in common decency. Harper looked into his eyes. There was no warmth there, but there was a rigid, unbending structure of honor. She reached out and took the bills. Her fingers brushed his. His skin was warm. Thank you, she said softly. My driver, Carmine, is downstairs. He'll take you wherever you want to go, Vincent said, turning back toward his desk. Don't go back to the bus stop, Harper. It was the first time he had used her name. It sounded strange coming from him. Solid. Real. Harper turned and walked out the front door. The lock clicked shut behind her, finalizing her departure. Inside the apartment, Vincent stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the street far below. He watched as the heavy doors of his building opened, and a tiny figure scurried out into the overcast afternoon, climbing into the waiting Lincoln. Vincent picked up his cell phone. He dialed a number. Leo, Vincent said, when the line connected. Yeah, boss. I need a name pulled. Southside area. Goes by Ray. Probably a heavy drinker. Likely has a record for domestic assault. Give me an hour. What do you want me to do when I find him? Vincent watched the Lincoln merge into the city traffic and disappear. The memory of the finger marks on Harper's wrists burned in his mind's eye. Just find him, Vincent said. His voice was cold enough to freeze glass. I'll handle the rest myself. Room 114 at the Starlight Motel smelled of industrial bleach and old cigarettes. It was a vast improvement over the bus stop. Harper sat cross-legged on the faded floral bedspread, staring at the 4 crisp $100 bills and a handful of 20s fanned out in front of her. She had spent $40 on the room and $20 on a hot meal from a drive-through down the street. It was the first time she had felt full in months. But the money didn't bring relief. It brought a creeping, icy paranoia. People like Vincent Gallo didn't hand out $500 out of charity. In her world, everything had a price tag. A free drink at a bar meant you owed a conversation. A free ride meant you owed a favor. $500 from a Mafia boss. She couldn't even calculate the interest on a debt like that. She walked to the window, parting the heavy, stained curtain just an inch. The motel parking lot was mostly empty, illuminated by a flickering neon sign. Every time a pair of headlights swept past on the main road, her chest tightened. She expected to see Ray's rusted pickup truck pull in. She expected the heavy thud of his boots on the concrete walkway outside her door. She let the curtain fall closed and locked the deadbolt. Then she slid the security chain into place. Finally, she dragged the heavy wooden dresser in front of the door. It wouldn't stop a determined man, but it would make enough noise to wake her. Across town, in a neighborhood where the streetlights were shot out for privacy, Vincent pushed open the heavy oak door of O'Malley's pub. The bar was a dive in the truest sense of the word. The floor was sticky with decades of spilled beer. The air was thick with the smell of cheap whiskey and unwashed bodies. A few patrons glanced up at the chime of the door, their eyes sliding over Vincent's tailored wool coat and polished leather shoes. They quickly looked away. The kind of man who wore a $5,000 suit into a place like O'Malley's was either dangerously lost or just plain dangerous. Nobody wanted to find out which. Leo sat in a booth near the back, nursing a club soda. He was a broad-shouldered man with a flattened nose and knuckles that looked like scarred walnuts. He nodded as Vincent approached. "He's at the bar," Leo murmured, not pointing. "Third stool from the end. Brown leather jacket. Drank 3 Boilermakers in the last hour." Vincent turned his head slightly. Ray. He was a thick, stocky man in his early 30s. He had a patchy beard and a greasy baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He was leaning heavily on the bar, arguing with the bartender over the price of a refill. His voice was loud, slurred, and laced with aggressive entitlement. This was the man who had left bruised fingerprints on Harper's wrists. This loud, sloppy, pathetic drunk. Disgust curled in Vincent's stomach. It was a quiet, cold sensation. "Do you want me to drag him out back, boss?" Leo asked softly. "There's an alley. No cameras." "No," Vincent said. "Stay here." Vincent walked over to the bar. He moved with a predatory silence, the noise of the pub seeming to dampen around him. He pulled out the stool directly next to Ray and sat down. The bartender approached, eyeing Vincent nervously. "What can I get you?" "Nothing," Vincent said. Ray turned his head, squinting at Vincent. His eyes were bloodshot, his breath sour. He took in the suit, the tie, the calm posture. "This seat's saved, pal. My buddy's in the can." Vincent didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on the dusty mirror behind the bar. "Your buddy left 10 minutes ago through the side door. He didn't want to pay his half of the tab." Ray frowned, his alcohol-soaked brain struggling to process the information. He looked toward the bathrooms, then back at Vincent, puffing his chest out. "Who the hell are you?" Vincent finally turned his head. His eyes, the color of wet slate, locked onto Ray's. He didn't blink. "I am a consequence," Vincent said gently. He reached out. His movement was casual, unhurried. He placed his right hand flat on the bar, right over Ray's left hand. He didn't strike him. He simply pressed down. At first, Ray tried to jerk his hand away, but Vincent's grip was like an industrial vice. He applied pressure, specific, calculated pressure to the small bones in the back of Ray's hand. Ray gasped, his knees buckling slightly against the bar stool. The color drained from his face. "Quiet," Vincent whispered. It was a command, not a request. Ray clamped his mouth shut, a small whine escaping his nose. Sweat broke out on his forehead. "A young woman named Harper," Vincent said, his voice barely audible over the hum of the neon beer signs. "Blonde, small, has a faded bruise on her jaw and deep contusions on her forearms." Ray's eyes widened in terror. The pain in his hand was excruciating, but the dead, emotionless look in Vincent's eyes was worse. "I don't know who you are," Ray hissed through his teeth. "You don't need to. You just need to listen," Vincent said, increasing the pressure by a fraction of an inch. A sickening pop echoed faintly. Ray squeezed his eyes shut, a tear leaking down his cheek. "You will never speak to her again," Vincent continued, his tone conversational. "You will not call her. You will not drive past her place of employment. If she walks down the left side of the street, you cross to the right. If she enters a room, you leave it." Vincent leaned in closer. The smell of expensive cedar cologne cut through the stench of stale beer. "If I hear your name spoken in her presence," Vincent whispered, "if I see a shadow that belongs to you cast anywhere near her, I will not come back to this bar. I will send men who are much less polite than I am. They will take you to a warehouse near the docks, and they will spend 3 days making sure you understand the anatomy of your own nervous system. Do we have an absolute understanding?" Ray nodded frantically. He couldn't speak. Vincent held his gaze for 3 more seconds, letting the fear bake into the man's bones. Then he released his hand. Ray immediately cradled his hand against his chest, sliding off the bar stool. He backed away, his chest heaving, his eyes darting toward the exit. He didn't say a word. He just turned and bolted for the door, nearly tearing it off its hinges in his rush to get out into the cold air. Vincent pulled a crisp $50 bill from his money clip and left it on the bar. He stood up, adjusted his cuffs, and walked back to Leo's booth. "Done?" Leo asked. He's moving to a different zip code by morning," Vincent said. "Let's go home." The smell of burning bacon grease and stale coffee hit Harper like a physical wall as she walked through the back door of Frankie's diner on Wednesday morning. She was exhausted. She had barely slept in the motel, jolting awake at every passing siren, every door slam. But she was here. She had to be. She walked past the dish pit, bracing herself for Gary. Usually, when she was late or missed a shift, he would corner her near the walk-in freezer, his face purple, spitting insults about her work ethic. She spotted him near the grill. He was holding a clipboard, yelling at one of the line cooks. Harper took a deep breath, clutching her apron tight, and walked up to him. "Gary, I'm here." Gary whipped around. The anger on his face vanished the second he saw her. It was replaced by a rigid, sweaty panic. He dropped the clipboard onto the stainless steel counter with a clatter. "Harper," he squeaked. He actually took a step back, wiping his greasy hands on his pants. You're back. I missed my shift yesterday." "I know." She started, the apology trained into her throat. "I'll take the bad sections for a week. I can scrub the grease traps." "No," Gary blurted out. He looked around nervously, as if expecting a man in an Italian suit to step out of the pantry. No, you don't have to do that. Are you feeling better? Medical emergency, right? Fully recovered." Harper stared at him. The man who had threatened to fire her a dozen times was looking at her like she was a ticking bomb. "I'm fine," she said slowly. Great. Look, you take Section 1 today. Window booths. Easy money. Take a break whenever you need. Just let me know if you need anything. Okay?" Harper didn't know what to say. She just nodded and walked out onto the diner floor. The shift was surreal. Gary didn't yell at her once. When a customer complained about a cold side of fries, Gary didn't blame her. He went out and apologized to the table himself. Her co-workers noticed. Maria, a waitress who had worked there for 10 years, cornered her by the coffee machines. "Who did you sleep with?" Maria asked, her voice low. "What?" Harper recoiled. "Gary is treating you like the Queen of England. He comped 2 of your tables. Did you threaten to sue him or something?" "No," Harper said, keeping her head down as she filled a carafe. "Just a misunderstanding." She walked back out to the floor. It was a lie, and they both knew it. The shadow of Vincent Gallo was hanging over her, altering reality. It was a terrifying kind of power, to change a man's behavior with a single phone call. At 1 p.m., the lunch rush was dying down. Harper was wiping down a corner booth when the bell above the front door chimed. She looked up automatically, a smile plastered on her face. "Welcome to—" The words died in her throat. The rag slipped from her hand, hitting the linoleum floor with a wet slap. It was Ray. He stood in the doorway, looking frantic. His hair was a greasy mess, and his eyes were darting around the diner wildly. He was clutching his left hand against his chest, wrapped tightly in a dirty bandage. Harper's heart slammed against her ribs. The air in the diner vanished. Every instinct screamed at her to run to the kitchen, to lock herself in the bathroom, to find a knife. She took a staggering step backward, hitting the edge of a table. Ray spotted her. He didn't stride toward her with his usual aggressive swagger. He moved quickly, but his shoulders were hunched. He looked terrified. He stopped 5 feet away from her. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for her. "Harper!" he croaked. His voice cracked. He sounded completely broken. "Don't!" Harper gasped, her hands coming up defensively. Gary, call the police." "No, no police. Please," Ray begged, holding up his good hand in surrender. I had to come. I had to see you. To tell you." "Tell me what? Leave me alone, Ray." The few customers left in the diner turned to watch. Gary emerged from the kitchen, stopping dead in his tracks when he saw the scene, too terrified of the Gallo name to intervene, but too curious to leave. "I'm leaving," Ray said, his eyes welling up with tears. He looked pathetically small. "I'm going to my brother's place in Nevada. I'm packing my truck right now. I just came to tell you." Harper blinked, her panic stalling. "What?" "I'm going. You'll never see me again. I swear to God, Harper, I swear on my life." Ray took a half step forward, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "Just please." "Call him off." Harper frowned, the fear slowly being replaced by utter confusion. "Call who off?" "Your guy, the suit." Ray shuddered, a full body tremor. He looked down at his bandaged hand, then back up at her. "Tell him I did what he said. Tell him I'm gone. I didn't come near you. I just had to make sure you told him, okay? Don't let him find me again." Without waiting for an answer, Ray turned and practically ran out of the diner. The bell chimed happily as the door swung shut. Harper stood frozen, the damp rag forgotten at her feet. Ray was gone. The man who had haunted her every waking moment for a year, the man who had promised to ruin her life if she ever left, had just begged her for mercy. She looked at her wrists. The purple bruises were still there, aching dully. Vincent. He hadn't just given her money. He had tracked down a violent man in a city of millions, and in a single night completely dismantled him. He had ripped the monster out of her life by the roots. A cold chill ran down Harper's spine. Ray was dangerous because he was angry and stupid. Vincent Gallo was dangerous because he was intelligent, utterly ruthless, and operating on a level of power she couldn't even comprehend. She owed her freedom to the devil, and she needed to clear the ledger before he came to collect. Gallo Logistics occupied the top 4 floors of a gleaming glass and steel skyscraper in the financial district. The lobby was a temple of wealth, polished black marble floors, brushed steel fixtures, and a quiet, ambient hum of money-changing hands. Harper felt like a piece of trash blown in from the street. She wore her best clothes, the same denim jacket and black jeans, but she had scrubbed her sneakers in the motel sink and braided her damp hair back. She clutched her worn canvas purse tightly as she approached the sprawling front reception desk. A woman in a sharp grey blazer looked up from her dual monitors. Her eyes did a quick, ruthless assessment of Harper's attire. The polite, professional smile she offered didn't reach her eyes. "Good afternoon. May I help you?" the receptionist asked. "I'm here to see Vincent Gallo," Harper said. Her voice wavered slightly, and she hated herself for it. She cleared her throat and tried again, firmer. "I need to speak with him." "Does Mr. Gallo have an appointment with you, Miss Harper?" "And no, he doesn't. But he'll see me." The receptionist's smile tightened into a thin line of annoyance. "I'm afraid Mr. Gallo is a very busy man. He doesn't take unscheduled walk-ins. If you'd like to leave a message, I can pass it along to his assistant." Harper stood her ground. She reached into her purse and pulled out 3 crisp $100 bills and 2 20s. $340, the remainder of the money Vincent had given her. She laid it flat on the pristine white counter. "Tell him the stray is here to pay her tab," Harper said. The receptionist stared at the cash, then at Harper, her professional facade slipping into genuine bewilderment. She picked up a phone, pressed a single button, and spoke in a hushed tone. She turned her back slightly, shielding her mouth. A minute later, the private elevator doors at the end of the lobby chimed and slid open. Carmine stepped out. He wore a dark suit, his massive frame looking completely out of place in the sleek corporate environment. He spotted Harper instantly. He didn't smile, but he gave a short, curt nod and gestured for her to follow him. Harper picked up the cash, ignoring the receptionist's stare, and followed the giant into the elevator. The ride up to the top floor was silent. When the doors parted, Harper stepped into a world that made Vincent's apartment look modest. It was an expanse of dark wood, glass partitions, and sweeping views of the city harbor. Men and women in expensive suits moved with quiet purpose. Carmine led her past a row of offices to a heavy mahogany double door at the very end of the hall. He opened it and stepped aside. "Boss," Carmine announced. Harper walked in. Vincent was standing behind a massive glass desk, looking over a sprawling architectural blueprint. He wore a navy blue three-piece suit, the jacket unbuttoned. He looked up as she entered. He didn't look surprised. He looked exactly as he had in the kitchen, calm, calculating, and intensely focused. "Carmine, close the door," Vincent said. The heavy doors clicked shut behind her, sealing her in. The soundproofing in the office was absolute. The silence was heavy. "You didn't go to work today," Vincent noted, rolling up the blueprint and setting it aside. "I went," Harper said, walking up to the edge of the glass desk. "I left early." "Gary gave you trouble?" "Gary thinks I'm a mob boss's girlfriend. He gave me the best section and offered to comp my meals." She slapped the wad of cash down onto the glass desk. It made a sharp, flat sound. $340. I spent $160 on the motel and food. I'll pay you the rest on Friday when I get my tips." Vincent looked at the money. He didn't touch it. He looked back up at her. "I told you it wasn't a loan. I don't care what you called it. I don't owe people, especially not people like you. People like me." Vincent leaned his hands on the desk. "And what kind of person am I, Harper? The kind who breaks a man's hand and threatens to torture him to death just to make a point," she fired back, her voice rising. The anger she had been holding on to all day finally spilled over. "Ray came into the diner today. He was crying. He was terrified of you." "He should be," Vincent said simply. "He didn't deny it. He didn't justify it. You had no right to do that. You didn't even know me. I saw the bruises on your wrists. That's my problem, not yours." Harper leaned forward, gripping the edge of the desk. "I survived Ray for a year. I know how to survive bottom feeders. But you're not a bottom feeder. You're a shark. And I will not be a pawn in whatever twisted honor complex you have going on. I pay my own way. Keep the money. I'll get you the rest on Friday." She turned on her heel and marched toward the door. She reached for the heavy brass handle. "Harper." His voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a gravity that stopped her dead in her tracks. She turned around. Vincent had walked around the desk. He was standing in the middle of the vast office, hands in his pockets. He was looking at her not as a stray, not as a victim, but as something entirely different. Something that intrigued him. "You think you survived, Ray?" Vincent said quietly. "You didn't. You endured him. There is a difference. Enduring means you let him chip away at your life until there's nothing left but fear and a plastic bag of clothes. Surviving means you eliminate the threat." "I don't kill people," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Neither do I. Not unless they refuse to listen to reason," Vincent said. He took a slow step toward her. "You walked into the headquarters of a criminal syndicate today. You bypassed my security. You slammed money on my desk. And you yelled at me in my own office." He stopped 3 feet away from her. The height difference was staggering. "Ray beat you, and you ran," Vincent murmured, tilting his head slightly. "I handed you back your life, and you came here to fight me." "Why?" Harper looked up into his iron-colored eyes. Her heart was racing, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. She was terrified of him, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't shrinking. "Because I know how to fight the devil," she whispered fiercely. "I don't know how to owe him a favor." A slow, dangerous smirk touched the corner of Vincent's mouth. It changed his entire face, making him look less like a businessman and more like the predator he truly was. "You don't owe me a favor, Harper," Vincent said softly. "But you do owe me $160. I'll pick you up on Friday at 8. We'll get dinner. We can discuss your payment plan then." Harper's breath hitched. "I didn't agree to dinner." "No," Vincent agreed smoothly, turning back toward his desk. "But you will, because if you don't, you'll still be in my debt. And we both know you can't stand that." He didn't look back at her as he sat down in his leather chair. "Carmine will show you out." Harper stood frozen for a second, her mind spinning. The trap had closed, and she had walked right into it, carrying her own bait. She pushed the heavy door open and walked out, the tether between them pulling taut, unbreakable, and entirely by design. Friday night at the Starlight Motel smelled like damp carpets and cheap aerosol air freshener. Harper stood in front of the scratched bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection under the harsh fluorescent light. She didn't own a dress. She didn't own heels. She was wearing the same faded black jeans, paired with a plain, long-sleeved charcoal sweater she had bought for $4 at a thrift store down the block from the diner. It was thin, but it covered the fading yellow-purple bands on her wrists. On the chipped laminate counter sat a plain white envelope. Inside were 8 crisp $20 bills. $160, her tip money from the week, plus an advance Gary had practically shoved into her hands when she asked for it, his eyes darting around the diner as if Vincent Gallo were hiding behind the jukebox. At exactly 7:58 p.m., the heavy thrum of a powerful engine vibrated through the motel's thin walls. Harper grabbed the envelope, shoved it into her back pocket, and walked out before he could knock. The black Lincoln was idling in the potholed parking lot, looking like a panther in a junkyard. Carmine was already out, holding the rear door open. He gave her that same curt, wordless nod. Harper climbed in. Vincent was sitting in the back, working on a tablet. He wore a dark grey suit, but the tie was gone, the top 2 buttons of his crisp white shirt undone. He looked up as she slid onto the leather seat across from him. His eyes did a slow, clinical sweep of her thrift store sweater, her jeans, her nervous posture. He didn't look disappointed. He didn't look impressed. He just looked at her. "You're precisely on time," Vincent said, setting the tablet aside. "I wanted to get this over with," Harper said. She reached into her back pocket, pulled out the envelope, and tossed it onto the empty space on the leather seat between them. $160. We're square." Vincent glanced at the envelope. He made no move to pick it up. "Drive, Carmine." The car glided out of the parking lot. The neon sign of the Starlight Motel faded in the rear-view mirror, replaced by the towering, glittering skyline of the city's moneyed districts. "Where are we going?" Harper asked, crossing her arms over her chest. The leather seat was incredibly soft, but she sat rigidly on the edge of it. "A place where the food is better than the diner," Vincent replied mildly. They didn't go to a sprawling, brightly lit restaurant with valets and red carpets. Carmine navigated the Lincoln down a narrow cobblestone alleyway in the historic district, pulling up to a solid, unmarked steel door set into a brick wall. Vincent got out. Harper followed. He didn't knock. He just pulled the heavy door open, stepping aside to let her enter first. The interior was a jarring contrast to the alley. It was a cavernous, dimly lit space with exposed brick walls, smelling intensely of roasting garlic, wood smoke, and rich red wine. There were only 6 tables in the entire room, spaced far apart to ensure absolute privacy. There was no music playing, only the low hum of hushed conversations and the clinking of heavy silver against porcelain. An older man in an immaculate white apron emerged from the kitchen. He had flour dusting his forearms and a warm, genuine smile that vanished the second he saw Vincent, shifting instantly into a look of deep, solemn respect. "Mr. Gallo, your table is ready." "Thank you, Matteo," Vincent said. They were led to a corner booth tucked behind a half wall of frosted glass. Matteo didn't hand them menus. He simply poured 2 glasses of water, nodded once, and disappeared. Harper stared at the empty space where a menu should be. "How do we order?" "We don't. Matteo cooks what he bought fresh at the docks this morning," Vincent said, taking a sip of his water. "If you have an allergy, I suggest you tell me now." "I can't afford this," Harper said flatly, looking around the room. The men at the other tables wore watches that cost more than her life insurance policy. "You aren't paying for it." "I don't let men buy me dinner." Vincent leaned back against the plush booth, fixing his dark, iron-colored eyes on her. "You let men hit you. You let men threaten you, but you draw the line at a plate of pasta?" The words were a calculated strike. They landed exactly where he intended. Harper flinched, a flash of hot, blinding anger rushing to her cheeks. She planted her hands on the heavy mahogany table and started to slide out of the booth. "I'm leaving." "Sit down," Vincent said. It wasn't a shout. It was a low, vibrational command that commanded obedience not through fear, but through absolute, unbending authority. Harper froze halfway out of the booth. She glared at him, her chest heaving. "You run every time you feel cornered," Vincent observed quietly, his eyes locked on hers. "You ran from Ray. You ran from my apartment. You are trying to run now." "Sit down, Harper. I am not going to hurt you." Slowly, hating herself for the capitulation, she slid back into the booth. "I didn't let him hit me," she whispered fiercely, the anger vibrating in her vocal cords. "I didn't have a choice." "There is always a choice, even if it's a bad one," Vincent said. "You chose to stay until staying became more dangerous than leaving. And then you chose the street. That takes a specific kind of endurance. I respect it." Harper blinked, thrown off balance. She had expected pity. She had expected mockery. She had not expected him to validate the brutal mathematics of her survival. Matteo returned, placing 2 steaming plates of linguine with clams and a rich white wine sauce between them. He set a bottle of Barolo on the table, uncorked it, and left. Harper looked at the food. Her stomach gave a hollow, traitorous rumble. "Eat," Vincent said. He picked up his fork. She picked up hers. The first bite was a revelation. It tasted like butter, sea salt, and perfection. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, unable to mask her reaction. When she opened them, Vincent was watching her. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked, her voice losing a fraction of its sharp edge. "You have your money. You proved your point at your office. I'm a waitress. You run. Whatever it is you run. We don't belong at the same table." "I brought you here because you intrigue me," Vincent said simply, taking a slow drink of his wine. "Most people who walk into my office are terrified. They sweat. They stutter. They beg. You walked in, slammed $300 on my desk, and insulted my morality. I was angry. You were cornered. Vincent corrected. And when you are cornered, you bite. I like that. The dinner progressed in a strange, simmering tension. It wasn't the volatile, terrifying unpredictability of a night with Ray. It was the heavy, calculated stillness of a chess match. Harper ate every bite on her plate. She didn't pretend to be dainty. She was too practical to waste $100 meal. Vincent ate methodically, asking her questions that felt more like interrogations. He didn't ask about her favorite movies or her hobbies. He asked about her childhood in the foster system. He asked how long she had tolerated Gary's verbal abuse at the diner before realizing he was too cowardly to actually fire her. He was mapping her out, searching for the structural weaknesses in her architecture. You see everything as a transaction, Harper noted, pushing her empty plate away. The wine had warmed her blood, easing the rigid tension in her shoulders. Everything is a transaction, Vincent replied, swirling the dark red liquid in his glass. People just wrap it in different packaging to feel better about themselves. Love is a transaction of emotional security. Friendship is a transaction of time and loyalty. Respect is a transaction of power. And what was fixing Ray? She challenged. What did you buy with that? Vincent set his glass down. The quiet clink sounded loud in the hushed restaurant. I bought order, Vincent said. His voice was cold, stripped of the mild conversational tone he had been using. I despise chaos. Men like Ray are chaotic. They use violence because they lack vocabulary. They strike because they have no actual control over their own pathetic lives. It is sloppy. It offends me. So you only use violence when it's neat? She asked, her cynicism returning. I use violence when it is the only language the other party understands, Vincent corrected softly. But I never use it to feel big. That is the difference between a monster and a professional. He reached across the table. Harper went perfectly still. Her instinct, honed by a year of sudden, drunken strikes, was to pull her arms back, to shield her face. But she forced herself to remain seated. She forced herself to look at him. Vincent's hand stopped inches from hers. He didn't grab her. He slowly, deliberately extended his index finger and gently pushed the sleeve of her charcoal sweater up her forearm. The bruises were fading into an ugly, mottled yellow. His touch was impossibly light. It didn't carry the bruising force of a man trying to leave his mark. It carried the careful, restrained weight of a man evaluating damage. His skin was warm against her chilled flesh. Does it still hurt? He asked, his eyes locked on the bruises. Not her face. Only if I press on it, Harper whispered. Her throat felt tight. Then don't press on it, he murmured. He slowly pulled her sleeve back down, covering the marks. He withdrew his hand and leaned back in his seat, the momentary breach of space over. Matteo cleared the plates. No check was brought. No money exchanged hands. Vincent simply stood up, buttoned his suit jacket, and gestured toward the door. The ride back to the Starlight Motel was silent. Harper watched the city lights smear across the tinted glass of the Lincoln. She felt a strange, hollow sinking in her chest. The dinner was over. The debt was paid. The transaction was complete. Tomorrow, she would go back to the diner, and Vincent Gallo would go back to running his empire. Carmine pulled the heavy car into the cracked asphalt lot of the Starlight. The neon sign flickered off, then on again, bathing the interior of the car in cheap blue light. Harper reached for the door handle. Leave the envelope, Vincent said into the quiet. She stopped, looking back at him. The white envelope still sat on the leather seat between them. No, I said I pay my debts. Your debt was paid when you sat in the booth and stopped flinching every time I moved, Vincent said, his voice flat. He looked out his window at the rundown motel. "You aren't staying here tonight." Harper's grip tightened on the door handle. Panic, sharp and familiar, spiked. "Excuse me." "The Starlight is a front for a mid-level methamphetamine distribution ring," Vincent said casually, turning back to face her. "The man in room 112 beats his dog. The lock on your door, room 114, can be picked with a flattened paperclip in under 4 seconds. It is a hazard, Harper. And as I said, I despise chaos." "I can't afford anywhere else," she snapped, feeling cornered all over again. "You aren't paying for the next place, either." "I told you." "I know what you told me," Vincent interrupted, his voice dropping into that low, vibrational register that commanded the room. "You don't owe people. You pay your own way. You don't take charity." "I heard you." He leaned forward, bridging the gap between them. "This isn't charity, Harper. I am offering you an apartment in a building I own in the Diamond District. Secure access, doorman. You will live there. You will continue working at the diner if that mundane existence pleases you. You will buy your own groceries, but you will sleep behind a door that cannot be kicked in by a drunk with a grudge." Harper stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Why?" "Because you are a survivor," Vincent said softly. "And I collect rare things. I'm not a thing to be collected. Then prove it. Live in my building, eat my food, and if you ever decide you can do better, walk out." Vincent reached past her and popped her door open. The cold night air rushed into the warm car. "Go pack your bag, Harper. Carmine will wait." Harper looked from the dark, dangerous man in the back seat to the miserable, blinking neon sign of the motel. It was a choice between the devil she knew and the devil who had just bought her dinner. She grabbed her purse, leaving the white envelope on the leather seat. The lines between protector and captor are blurring, and Harper has a massive choice to make. Will she step into Vincent's gilded cage, or will her survivor instincts force her back into the cold? What do you think Harper will do next? Trust the Mafia boss, or run for her life? Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you're loving the tension between Vincent and Harper, smash that like button, share this video with your fellow dark romance addicts, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the thrilling final parts of their story. See you next time.